They knew everything about each other. They were always together.
That is, until an unthinkable act of violence ripped their romance apart at the seams.
The caller stated that the shooter might still be in the house.
We were worried that whoever did it was still out there.
As the investigation heats up, a series of unexplained events sends police scrambling for answers.
When I hear unaccounted for time, my spidey senses tingle.
Had someone from their past marked this couple for murder?
He could definitely make an enemy.
Or was there a darker secret behind closed doors?
There were photographs of her. She was nude and chained up.
This has been referred to by investigators as a master slave agreement.
In the early morning hours of November 18th, 2009, dispatchers in the sleepy town of Vermilion, Ohio, are jolted to life by a frantic call.
911, I need a police fire ambulance. I need help. Somebody shot my husband.
The caller is 31-year-old Julene Simko. The alleged victim is her husband, local businessman Jeremy Simko.
Somebody shot your husband.
She's hysterical, she's crying, so the communication was quite difficult.
The operator instructs Julene on how to administer CPR to Jeremy. That's when Julene reveals another terrifying detail.
Yeah, is the person that shot your husband still in
EMTs are immediately dispatched to the scene. As armed officers approach the Simco residence, they find the front door locked. Unable to breach it, officers move to the rear of the home.
He observed that the door itself was open, and that's when they entered the house. They clear the first floor.
The officers make their way through the upper floors of the residence.
The only light that they saw was light coming from the bottom of a doorway that was closed. They're announcing themselves as their Mrs. Simco then opens the door to the bedroom.
She was basically unclothed. She had like wrapped in a towel or blanket of some type, and she had a lot of blood on her.
Mr. Simco is lying on the floor. He is not clothed. He has an obvious injury, and he's laying on his back.
Julene pleads with officers to help her husband.
There's two people in the house, one person's dead. This lady's hysterical. You have a lot of things running through your mind.
It was just a very disorienting, very shocking situation for her to be in.
Born and raised in northern Ohio, Julene Nick seemed to enjoy a typical Midwestern upbringing.
Julian was in honor society in school. He was in the more advanced classes. She was smart. She was a pleasant person to be around. She was always nice. If you were to meet her, you'd say, wow, she's a great person. Seemed to be always happy.
On the outside, Julene's life seemed picture perfect, but that was not always the case.
As a child, Julene was a victim of a sexual assault that was perpetrated on her by her father. Mr. Nick spent time in prison over this incident.
Eventually, Julene's mother divorced her, giving Julene a stepfather, a stepbrother, and a semblance of a steady, normal life.
She really talked about her stepdad as if he were her father.
Though her home life was more stable, Julene's childhood scars made her wary of getting too close to people. Even her high school sweetheart, Jack Hyder Jr.
I would say she keeps stuff bottled up. She never really talked to me about her biological father.
Shortly after graduating high school in 1997, Julene met one of her boyfriend Jack's childhood friends, 23-year-old Jeremy Simko. 5 years older than Julene, Jeremy also had attended the same high school years earlier, though Jeremy hadn't been an honor society type like Julene.
He was an aggressive person. He was a dominant person, and if you crossed him, there'd be a fight.
Jeremy loved the outdoors, hunting, nature.
Thankfully, after her personality,
He was a tree trimmer, arborist.
A man's man. He was a hard-working guy. He was very good in the tree.
the work paid well, and pretty soon this one-time bad boy had turned a corner and even gotten engaged.
He sort of crawled out of where he came from.
But when Jeremy ran into shy 18-year-old Julene in the summer of 1997, the chemistry between them was undeniable.
It was a total surprise. 'Cause I would say she was more of a goody two-shoes. He was rowdy and odd.
Within days of meeting Julene, Jeremy broke off his engagement. A week later, Julene's boyfriend, Jeremy's buddy Jack Hyder, was served a sobering dose of reality.
I went to her friend's house and I ended up finding her and Jeremy together. Once that happened, we just never talked again.
Despite their rocky start, from that moment on, Julene and Jeremy were in
A very angry temperament. Julene helped him dial that back a little bit.
She talked how much she loved Jeremy. I mean, there wasn't a story that didn't have Jeremy. They appeared to be best friends.
A few months later, Jeremy started his own business, Simko Tree Service. Julene was his first employee.
She was on the ground. She fed the chipper all the time. Just kept everybody working. I thought she was a hard-working woman, for sure.
They worked together and played together. They were a normal, happy couple, always together. It worked for them.
On September 4th, 1999, the couple tied the knot. Soon after, the Simcoes saved up enough money to buy a farmhouse and barn on 2 acres in the quaint lakeside community of Vermilion.
The house was completely restored to like its original form, all redone in the original woodwork, very meticulously done.
They took good care of their property. You could tell
They spent a lot of time back there hunting.
The property behind the Simcoes' house eventually went on the market. Unfortunately, the asking price on the 42-acre lot was more than Jeremy and Julene could afford. So, the couple started saving their pennies in hopes of buying the land. They also began to focus their attention on starting a family.
They loved kids, wanted kids. They wanted to be parents so bad. They tried for many years.
They were, having some sort of fertility issues. They routinely went to the clinic to figure out what was wrong.
I do know that she was pregnant at one point. It was 3 months in, and she suffered a miscarriage.
Then, in 2009, the Simcoes received some good news of a different sort. Their 42-acre dream property was suddenly attainable.
They originally were trying to buy it years ago, but the owner wanted too much money for it. And
It was a dream of theirs.
However, before Jeremy and Julene could formally purchase the property, the unthinkable happened.
The call came in, somebody shot my husband. They have to look for somebody that shot her husband.
Having cleared all 3 floors of the farmhouse, police believe the intruder has fled the scene. They dispatch patrolmen to canvass the area, and then escort Julene into the hallway, away from her husband's body.
I'm trying to find out what happened. Could you tell me what happened, honey?
She's covered with blood. She's hysterical. So I kind of felt the best thing to do at the time was to get her to the hospital.
At 7:48 a.m., Julene is transported to nearby Mercy Hospital to be treated for any possible injuries. Meanwhile, news of the shooting begins.
I think it kind of rocked the little community.
We don't normally deal with homicides. I believe our last homicide prior to this was around 1995.
With tensions rising and an active shooter presumably on the loose, everyone in Vermilion is on edge.
we were worried that whoever did it was still out there.
Coming up, Julene recounts her harrowing brush with death.
I thought somebody was coming.
And investigators hope to get their first real glimpse at Jeremy's killer.
The security cameras were on the night of the murder. They did capture what was surrounding the house at the time.
November 18th, 2009. 36-year-old Jeremy Simko has been shot dead in his home, and his 31-year-old wife Julene's killer before they possibly strike again.
This isn't like when you're watching a movie or you're watching a television show where somebody else is handling it. Now it's on us to do the right thing and to look into the matter. So it's definitely a bit overwhelming.
With patrol officers searching the area for the alleged shooter, detectives cordon off the Simco's house and begin surveying the property.
Jeremy Simko was a very security-conscious person.
They had a number of signs indicating that trespassers were not welcome.
There were several alarms set up throughout the house. There were door alarms, there was alarms on the outside of the garage, there were window alarms.
Dogs were strategically located in 4 different places on the outside of the house. If I was just a stranger walking down the street and I looked at the front of their house, those signs would indicate to me that my presence would not be welcome there. As I walked around the house towards the back, I noticed a pair of black cotton gloves that were lying on the ground. They were entered into evidence.
Inside the home, find a .357 Magnum revolver.
There's 5 live cartridges and 1 spent cartridge in the chamber. It appears he has 1 gunshot wound, so it doesn't take a genius to figure out that very well might be the weapon that was used to shoot him.
However, the CSI team also finds 3 more bullet holes on the 2nd floor. In the master bedroom, police find another handgun, a 9mm Smith & Wesson. Could this be the firearm that fired the other 3 bullets? Before investigators can answer that question, they make another, more salacious discovery.
We located several marital aids. There was a vaginal pump that would appear to be used in a sexual act. In the sink adjacent to the room, there was a large black dildo that was actually just lying in the sink.
Investigators tag the sex toys along with the firearms and shell casings and bag them as evidence. Hospital, who informed them that Julene is still shaken, but is well enough to give a statement.
The doctors determined that she did not suffer any injury. So basically my encounter with her was in the emergency room. She's calmed down quite a bit at this point.
Julene, I'm still trying to figure out what happened. Can you shed any light on what's going on for me?
I asked Mrs. Simko what they had done the day prior to the homicide. She indicated that they had done some things outdoors. They had been canning pumpkins. They just had a peaceful day. And Jeremy then locked the dogs into their doghouse for the night and then came in, locked the door, and then they went to bed.
You went to bed with Jeremy?
Locked the dogs into their doghouse for the night and then came in, locked the door, and then they went to bed.
You went to bed with Jeremy? Okay. Do you know what time?
He was snoring and it was keeping her awake.
On him, she feels something wet. She then turns on a light, discovers him injured. He has blood on him, and he is not responsive to her.
Did you see anybody else?
Somebody.
I'm sorry, what?
I heard somebody.
Okay. And what happened then, honey?
I got the contact.
She went on to say that Jeremy had always told her, if you ever hear something, just shoot at the noise and it will make the person go away. So she retrieved a 9mm, 2 shots.
Investigators then broach a sensitive topic with Julene.
There were several marital aids throughout the house open. Did you guys have sexual relations?
Okay. Well, there was apparently a dildo in the sink. How long has that been there?
A couple days.
Had there been any argument? Okay. No discussions, no disputes, anything at all?
When I asked Mrs. Simko why somebody might do this, she did mention that there was money in the house.
Have you guys ever had anybody break into your house before?
Not the house. They were in the barn.
The Simcos had a problem with a couple separate incidents where individuals had entered their property and stole pieces of equipment from the barn. Jeremy was extremely upset.
They really wanted to amp up their security around to make sure no one came into their barn, no one came into their house.
Julene stormed the Simko residence, but who would want to shoot and kill Jeremy Simko? And why? That evening, Julene is released from the hospital and heads to her mother's house to spend the night. Meanwhile, investigators pull the surveillance footage from the Simco's home security system.
They had a DVR-style recording system. There were 2 cameras on the home.
The security cameras were on the night of the murder, and they did capture, what was surrounding the house at the time.
The difficulty is it wasn't all-encompassing. There were blind spots. So if somebody actually knew where the video was, in theory, they could have approached from a different angle.
With the cameras offering no tangible evidence of the shooter, investigators expand the perimeter of their search. It's this broader canvassing effort that unearths the next possible clue.
Where the murder took place, there was an abandoned school within a 2-minute walk between the school and the house, and there's this car parked there.
I think I ran a plate of a very similar vehicle. After we did an audit of the MDT, we realized that the vehicle that had been seen at night several days prior and the vehicle that I saw that Saturday morning were indeed the same vehicle.
Is it a mere coincidence that this same suspicious vehicle has been seen multiple times within walking distance of the crime scene? Had someone been staking out the Simco's residence?
Maybe that person either didn't see something or was possibly involved.
That was kind of a flag that went up.
Coming up, a potential suspect emerges, one who's hiding some pretty sordid secrets.
She was apparently in an extramarital affair.
Julene Simko reported that an unknown intruder had shot her 36-year-old husband, Jeremy. Investigators in Vermilion, Ohio, are working to track down the owner of a mysterious white SUV, a vehicle seen within blocks of the Simco's home, both before and after Jeremy Simco's murder.
We got the license plate, so we're thinking, okay, maybe this has something to do with this. So they run the license plate.
The registration comes back to a local man. Could he be responsible for Jeremy's death?
I went to the home of the registered owner, knocked on the door. I explained exactly why I was there, and the gentleman basically stated something to the effect, well, that explains some things. Initially, I'm like, what? And he said, well, my wife has some unaccounted for time. So certainly when I hear unaccounted for time, my spidey senses tingle.
Could the man's wife have been parked there during the time frame Jeremy was killed? Is she...
Give me a call. So later in the day, I was called by his wife.
The vehicle happened to be right across from a homicide.
Basically, she said that, yes, I was the one that parked the vehicle there. I explained why we were looking into the vehicle being there.
Do you know about how many times you parked your vehicle back there?
It was quite a few. Probably 10 times.
She said that she was involved in a relationship that she was trying to keep secret. She was apparently in an extramarital affair.
She was parking there, and then she was meeting a gentleman that she was having an affair with.
I mean, we were kind of sneaking around because my divorce hadn't gone through yet, and so we didn't want to be out in public a whole lot.
Given the woman's admission, detectives consider the idea that the man she's involved with may very well be Jeremy Simko. However, she claims it's not Jeremy she's sleeping with, but another local man.
Do you know if he knew the Simcoes by any chance?
I don't think so.
She was very upright and forthright with me.
The two of them are cleared of any wrongdoing.
It was just pure coincidence that it happened to be there. Neither of them actually knew the Simcoes.
It seems the case has reached a dead end. But the following morning, Vermilion police receive a call from Julene Simko, who just returned to her house for the first time since the murder.
She contacted us to report that the house had been broken into.
I went directly to the scene, and I interviewed Julene briefly about what was going on. The purpose of the return, if I recall, was they wanted to get a suit for Jeremy. When they arrive at the home, they discover that the very front of the house is kicked in or forcibly entered.
Somebody is breaking into this house. Somebody does want to get in here.
The safe had been kind of mutilated. The locking mechanism had been damaged, and it appeared like somebody tried to break into the safe.
There's a fire poker lying on top of the safe, and the tip is broken off. And the speculation was that this fire poker damaged the safe.
$4,000 is missing from the upstairs office. Was this a random robber taking advantage of an empty house? Or had Jeremy's killer returned to destroy any evidence linking them to the crime?
The surveillance system was taken. We have no surveillance of the burglaries.
I photographed the scene and then processed the safe for latent prints to see if we could get any prints off of it.
No fingerprints were obtained. Basically, whoever went over and damaged that house after we released the house back to the family, we have no idea who they are.
Investigators reach out to Jeremy's friends and coworkers. Turns out, there's plenty of people in Northern Ohio who might have reason to go after Jeremy and his money.
Jeremy wasn't shy on how he felt. I mean, he'd tell you, and that was him.
Jeremy had a lot of fights with contractors. I don't think anyone could actually do anything to his level of satisfaction. So some of them didn't get paid all the way.
He was a very demanding boss.
Had a former contractor, or perhaps a disgruntled former employee, killed Jeremy in an effort to recoup some of the money he owed them?
We kind of checked out to see if people that worked for him, they'd filed wage and hour complaints.
There was never any evidence that anybody murdered him over a business deal.
Who else could it be? I mean, that would be it for me.
With every dead end, the case grows colder and colder. Then, on the afternoon of November 25th, Julene throws an informal gathering for Jeremy's friends and family to celebrate his life. One of the guests in attendance is Vermilion police officer Corey Spores.
Patrolman Spores, in the past, had done tree service work for the Simko, so he actually knew them. Corey went to the wake, and while he was there, he stated that Julene Simko was talking to some people, and she mentioned to them, I'd like to tell you, I want to tell you everything that happened, but I can't remember. I want to tell you everything that happened, but I was in shock. So there are other variations that it could have been. I immediately thought that she was saying, I did it.
When investigators reach out to Julene for an explanation, it's her attorney that returns their call.
She'd retained counsel by this time, and we were not allowed to interview her.
The fact that Julene has now lawyered up does raise suspicions for police.
I'm assuming her attorney said, don't talk to the police. I get that. So we weren't able to follow up. I couldn't get any more information from her.
Thankfully, by that time, the warrant to search the Simco's business records and personal finances has come through. And after sorting through a mere fraction of the documents, detectives know one thing for certain. The Simcos were in some pretty deep financial trouble.
There were some things that were not quite proper in the way they were conducting their finances.
And one that they kept, which was probably more accurate. They were behind in bills, house payments, credit card payments.
Most shocking of all was a letter from a loan officer at one local bank.
They were attempting to purchase a 42-acre piece of land that was behind their property. But one of the difficulties they had was they had terrible credit rating.
When they ran their credit, the loan was denied. The rejection for the loan came down the day before he was killed.
Could the rejection from the bank be connected to Jeremy's murder? Coming up, the coroner's report sheds new light on the relationship between Jeremy and his killer.
Most intruders are not going to get that close to you when they're going to shoot you in the back of the head.
And investigators discover another dark secret about Jeremy and Julene's sex life.
The contract was actually a master-slave agreement.
It was really disturbing. I think we're all just...
Detectives in Vermilion, Ohio, are 1 week into their investigation of the homicide of Jeremy Simko, who was shot in the back of the head in his own home. And they've now discovered that just 1 day before his murder, Jeremy and his wife Julene were denied the loan they needed to purchase their dream property.
I spoke with the loan officer. Their loan request to purchase this 42 acres of land has been denied.
For investigators, the timing of this bad news seems suspicious, but it's not a lot to go on. so they looked to the coroner's report for additional insights about the murder.
The coroner determined that Jeremy Simko died from a gunshot wound. The end of the barrel of the gun was approximately 2 to 3 inches from the back of his head.
Whoever shot him had to be...
To you when they're going to shoot you in the back of the head.
But who else would be in bed with Jeremy except Julene?
We became suspicious of her. Everything that we learned just kept pointing back to her.
When the fingerprint and DNA analysis comes back, it casts an even larger cloud of suspicion over Julene.
The 357 did have DNA on it, the Simcoe's DNA. It did not have an unknown DNA, and it appeared to have been wiped.
There was really no evidence of an intruder being in it. There was no strange DNA, no prints.
To make an arrest, you have to have something called probable cause, but we didn't have it.
In the months that follow, detectives continue to analyze the evidence and search for other prospective leads. It's a process that takes time and manpower, which, in the case of the Vermilion PD, are two things in relatively short supply.
The size of the agency was a problem when you have a small town, because you have this case, and this case is going on.
Years pass without any new breaks in the case. Then, investigators receive a call from two of Jeremy's friends, Al Hopp and Jean Marie Becker. According to Jean Marie and Al, after Jeremy died, Julene was quick to get rid of everything that reminded her of Jeremy, including the farmhouse.
She did not go back into the house. They sold it. She had gone back to school. She was working in the medical field.
I think that Julene was able to just branch out after the murder. I knew she was dating some boy. The whole thing is, it's your husband. You love him so much. You want to know who did them in, but she never did.
Her opinion was Julene didn't seem to be upset about the homicide. She wasn't worried about her husband's murderer being found. She never expressed any anger that somebody had murdered her husband.
Al and Jean Marie also tell police that before the murder, there was always something a little...
Would look to Jeremy whenever she would answer.
Jeremy was a leader. He was like an alpha male type, dominant personality. Julene was submissive. She was pretty much doing what she was told to do.
Is it possible Julene lived in fear of her domineering husband and believed killing him was her only way out? Investigators decide to revisit the mountains of personal documents seized from the Simko residence at the time of the crime.
We began to uncover photo albums which would depict Mrs. Simko in forms of bondage.
There were photographs of her nude and chained up somewhere in their basement with a golf ball in her mouth, acting as a ball gag. There was several pornographic videos.
Not all of the footage in the Simcoe's home videos looks consensual.
Mrs. Simko appears to be crying in some photos. She appears to be in pain. It's hard to decide if she was genuinely enjoying the situation.
Investigators become even more concerned when they unclean and Jeremy.
The marital contract was actually a master-slave agreement, and in it, it depicted Mr. Simko would be her father, and Mrs. Simko would be his daughter. And they were very specific in their rituals and how each was to behave. Knowing that she had been a victim when she was a child, we were concerned that maybe she was being forced to do things that she didn't want to do.
There's good suspicion that he was abusing her because of all the pictures we discovered in his contract.
Was Julene again being victimized as she had been as a child? The evidence becomes even more compelling when investigators conduct a forensic analysis of the Simcoe's home computer.
When we searched the computer, we discovered a site that had been visited the day before the homicide.
There was evidence on their computer search history that indicated that somebody had looked up her father's obituary.
A memory of a very unpleasant time in her life. Their sexual activity might have caused her to snap and do something.
Coming up, Julene comes clean about the salacious material found in the Simco farmhouse.
I was a willing participant in everything that went on in the bedroom.
And a new witness gives detectives a crucial clue.
The nurse was kind of startled and said, "What did you say?"
Detectives in Vermilion, Ohio have uncovered racy new evidence in Jeremy Simko's murder investigation. A secret contract between Jeremy and his wife Julene that sheds new light on the case.
You could best describe it as a dominating, submissive contract between two parties.
After Jeremy's death, Vermilion investigators contact Julene's lawyer and request another interview. Surprisingly, Julene agrees. At the Vermilion police station, investigators confront Julene with the photos and the master-slave marriage contract.
I was a willing participant in everything that went on.
Okay. All right. There was none of that you were ever forced to do?
No.
She never indicated she was being, sexually abused or in an abusive relationship. She stated it was normal.
For your information, just so you know, it wasn't like in a daily relationship that was like this. This was just role playing.
Julene also denies ever searching online for her father's obituary. Investigators aren't convinced, but they still don't have enough concrete evidence to justify charging Julene with murder.
The Vermilion Police Department felt comfortable that Mrs. Simko is the individual who shot her husband, but they were concerned that there wasn't
There's no way to completely refute that because we weren't there. So we couldn't say positively she is our person.
In 2014, as the investigation enters its 8th year, detectives finally get the break they've been waiting for. Jeremy's friend, Al Hopp, tells them that he may have found someone with new information about Julene.
I have a friend who has a wife that works at the hospital. She was one of the initial first responders to Julene when she went to the hospital.
Investigators pay the nurse a visit on November 18th, 2014. She says she remembers her interaction with Julene like it was yesterday.
The nurse had no idea why Mrs. Simko was brought in. All she could see was a little blood on her. So she says something to the effect of, "So what's going on?" The nurse said, "I thought I heard the female say, 'I just shot my husband.'" The nurse was somebody shot my husband.
At the time, the nurse chalked it up to Julene's state of shock. But as the details of the case became public, she came to believe Julene had, in fact, killed her husband.
It was kind of like a puzzle. And we'd get little tiny pieces, and we fell in the hole.
On December 19th, 2014, Julene Simko is indicted for aggravated murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. She turns herself in without a fight.
I was extremely relieved. It was a lot of work. The ability to have that resolution to this type of a case was just fantastic.
However, the case against Julene remains almost entirely circumstantial, and the battle for her conviction is far from over.
If you're the defense, you want to have some sort of counterattack to what the prosecution is providing.
As the trial date approaches, Julene and her defense team know will be impossible. So they make a bold move and request what's called a bench trial.
In a jury trial, 12 jurors have to unanimously agree to either guilty or not guilty. In a bench trial, I'm the only one who makes a decision.
You have a much better chance of being found innocent with 12 different minds, 12 different backgrounds. I think it kind of took everybody by surprise that was what she decided on.